On my birthday, I had planned to share the happiest news of my life, that I was pregnant. Instead, my boyfriend handed me a gift box that contained a folded piece of paper. The note said, "I'm leaving you. You're useless, and I deserve better." He walked out while laughing, and to my shock, a few people chuckled too, thinking it was some kind of prank. But it wasn't. Our friends stared at me, waiting for a reaction. I just smiled, because he had no idea what I already knew. 2 months later, he was the one standing outside my house drunk, shouting my name. I'd been with Justin for a little over 3 years. In the beginning, he seemed charming, attentive, and unlike other men who never really looked at you when you spoke. Things escalated quickly. By our first anniversary, we were already living together in a tiny but cozy apartment that stretched our budget thin. Not ideal timing, but rent in the city is sky high, no matter what. The relationship wasn't flawless, but it felt stable. We shared goals. One day buying a home, traveling, maybe even raising kids. The difference was Justin cared a lot about appearances, the right car, trendy restaurants, carefully curated Instagram posts. I should have paid more attention to that side of him. It was a red flag I ignored. About 4 months ago, I started feeling sick most mornings. Tired, queasy. I bought a pregnancy test, more to eliminate the possibility than anything else. 2 pink lines appeared. I sat on the bathroom floor staring at the stick like I was trying to decode another language. I told my best friend Barbara first. She came over with wine for our usual girls' night, and when I stuck to water, she immediately guessed. She asked the right questions. What did I want? How would Justin take it? What about insurance, maternity leave? She helped me sort through my thoughts. I decided to wait before telling Justin. My birthday was coming up in 3 weeks, and we'd already planned a small party with close friends. I thought it would be the perfect moment to share the news. In the weeks before my birthday, Justin seemed more distant. He was on his phone more, home later, distracted. I chalked it up to stress at work. Meanwhile, I was hiding morning sickness, well, more like all-day sickness, and counting down the days until the party. That Saturday, I decorated the apartment while Justin went to pick up the cake. It took him 3 hours, but I brushed it off. Friends started arriving: Barbara and her husband Aaron, Sergio, my cousin Lana, and Maria, a friend I'd known since college. The night was fun. Music, drinks, food, laughter. I kept exchanging nervous glances with Barbara, who gave me reassuring nods. Around 9 p.m., Justin tapped his glass. My stomach flipped. Was he about to say something? Maybe he'd figured out the pregnancy. He launched into a speech about how lucky he was to have me in his life. I thought he might be leading up to a proposal. Then he handed me a small, ribbon-wrapped box. Phones came out, everyone waiting for the big reveal. Inside was that folded note. "I'm leaving you. You're useless, and I deserve better. Your stuff will be packed by Monday." At first, I thought it had to be a bad joke, but Justin's face was cold, distant, even smug. Then, loud enough for all to hear, he said we were over, that it had been fun, but he'd outgrown me, and then he laughed before walking out the door. The silence that followed was crushing. A few people awkwardly chuckled, assuming it was a prank, but it clearly wasn't. Barbara crossed the room, read the note, and muttered, "He's an absolute bastard." Then everyone started reacting: concern, outrage, disbelief. And me? I smiled. Not because I wasn't hurt, I was shattered and humiliated. But in that moment, I realized Justin had no idea what was coming. He thought he'd staged the perfect breakup, humiliating me in front of everyone. But he didn't know I was pregnant. He didn't know I'd found his secret credit card bills 2 weeks ago. He didn't know I'd already seen his text with M on his Apple Watch when he was in the shower. And he definitely didn't know I wasn't the kind of woman who crumbles under pressure. So I cut the cake, thanked everyone for coming, and acted like I was fine. Maria suddenly left, saying she felt sick, which was very suspicious timing. The rest stayed, offering support, places to stay, even alibis for murder, joking mostly. By midnight, everyone was gone except Barbara, who insisted on staying. Once we were alone, I broke down completely. The pregnancy, the betrayal, the public humiliation, it all came crashing out in tears. Barbara just held me. No empty cliches, no everything happens for a reason, just quiet comfort. Later that night, I told her about the baby. She wasn't even surprised. She'd already suspected. Then I showed her the credit card statements, hotels, expensive dinners, jewelry I'd never seen. I pulled up the screenshots of texts with M on his Apple Watch when he was in the shower, and we both knew who M was. Maria, especially after her sudden exit. We stayed up until dawn making plans. Barbara asked if I'd tell Justin about the baby. I said yes, eventually, but only on my terms, when I was ready, not a moment before. I wasn't going to stoop to his level with petty revenge, but I was determined that the truth, every last piece of it, would come to light. Barbara gave me this look, part concern and part admiration, while I explained what I had in mind. She told me I could be intimidating when I got that laser-focused expression. I laughed, an honest laugh, the first real one since that awful night with the gift box. Lying in bed alone for the first time in years, one hand resting protectively on my still flat stomach, I made 2 vows. 1, to my baby. I would build a safe, stable, loving home. And 2, to myself. I would come out of this stronger than before. Justin thought his cruel note marked the end of our story, but he had no idea. If there's one thing all those true crime podcasts I binged while folding laundry have taught me, it's that revenge, when it's deserved, requires patience, planning, and a clear mind. Lucky for me, I had all 3. Next time, I'll explain what unfolded in the days and weeks afterward, how I confirmed exactly who he left me for. Spoiler, it wasn't shocking, and how his dramatic exit strategy started falling apart almost immediately. Update number 1. Hey Reddit, Lily here. First off, thank you for all the support after my last post. Funny how strangers online can show more kindness than people you've known for years, right? So, where were we? Oh yes, the birthday disaster. Justin walked out after humiliating me in front of everyone, leaving me stunned and secretly carrying a pregnancy only Barbara knew about. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and pancakes. Barbara was still there, bless her, acting like it was any other day, but hovering just enough to make sure I was okay. She kept nudging me to eat, clearly worried about the baby. I forced down a few bites before nausea won. Morning sickness really is the worst. Justin didn't return that Sunday, which was both a relief and a fresh kind of torment. I cycled between numbness, rage, and a strange sort of cold planning. Lists became my lifeline. Finances, doctors, people I'd need to tell. My brain switched to survival mode, focusing on logistics instead of heartbreak. Barbara helped me pack some of Justin's belongings. Not all of them, just enough to send the message that he shouldn't plan on coming back. My phone kept buzzing with messages from friends. Most were supportive or confused, wanting to know if I was okay. A few seemed more interested in gossip than concern. One person's silence stood out. Maria. Remember her? The one who claimed she felt sick and slipped out of the party. Monday hit hard. I called in sick for work, which I never do, and scheduled an appointment with my doctor to confirm the pregnancy. Around noon, while I was reading up on tenants' rights since our lease was in both our names, a text came in from Justin. I'll be by at 7 to get my things. Make sure you're not there. The audacity. I stared at the screen for 5 solid minutes before replying with just one word. No. No explanations, no compromise. Just a boundary. He called instantly. I declined. Then I called Barbara, who gathered reinforcements. By 6:30, my apartment was full. Aaron, Sergio, Lana, she extended her visit, and a couple of others. A wall of protection from people who genuinely cared. At exactly 7, Justin arrived. His face when he saw the group, absolutely priceless. He tried to play tough, demanding to know what was going on. Aaron, 6'4", solid as a rock, handed him a single suitcase with clothes and essentials. Aaron told him he could get the rest later when he showed some decency. He tried to catch my eye. I stayed seated, deliberately calm. He started whining about how ridiculous this was and that I should just let him in. I finally spoke. I told him he was lucky I hadn't changed the locks yet, and we'd discuss the rest once I'd had time to process his little birthday surprise. Something in my tone must have sunk in because he backed down, grabbed the suitcase, and muttered that I always needed an audience. Rich, considering he dumped me in front of all our friends. After he left, I cried. Not for him, but for the future I thought I'd have, for the plans now shattered, for the baby who deserved better than a father capable of that cruelty. The very next morning, I called a locksmith. Locks changed. Now, about Maria. My suspicions about her began the second she bolted from the party. Confirmation came from an unexpected source. On Tuesday, Sergio texted me. He and Aaron had spotted Justin and Maria together 2 months ago, but weren't sure if it was innocent. He apologized for not saying anything sooner. It felt like being punched in the gut and vindicated at the same time. I knew he was cheating. I just didn't know it was with her. Someone who had eaten at my table, laughed in my living room, pretended to be my friend. That betrayal cut deep. But I didn't confront either of them. Not yet. I decided to wait, watch, and collect information. Maybe those true crime podcasts have really gotten to me, but patience is everything. Over the next week, I kept moving forward. The pregnancy was officially confirmed, 10 weeks along. I met with the lawyer about the lease and our shared assets. Thank God we weren't married, no divorce drama. I froze our joint credit card, opened a new account in my name, and secured my finances. Only Barbara knew about the baby. It wasn't denial, it was strategy. I needed my pieces in place first. 2 weeks after the birthday fiasco, Justin texted again, asking to talk things over and collect more stuff. I agreed to meet, but on my terms, at a busy coffee shop in daylight. He looked awful, unshaven, dark circles, rumpled clothes. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction. He launched into some half-baked speech about being unhappy, feeling trapped, thinking a clean break was better for everyone. I let him ramble until I asked, "Is Maria making you happy?" The look on his face, absolute deer in headlights. He stammered out weak denials, so transparent it was almost funny. I cut him off, told him I knew about Maria, about the hotel charges on his hidden credit card, about the jewelry he bought her with the money we supposedly needed for rent. I asked him to just be honest for once. He deflated instantly, trying the classic "it's not what you think" line. I shut that down. What mattered now was that he could pick up the rest of his things Saturday at 2 p.m. with Aaron present to supervise. After that, I didn't want to hear from him unless it was through my lawyer. His voice actually squeaked when he repeated the word lawyer. He begged, saying we didn't need them and could work it out ourselves. Too late for that. Even though my pulse quickened, I kept my composure. I told him calmly that we'd already moved past this stage, that his choice was clear enough at my birthday party, and I was simply honoring it. As I rose to leave, he caught my wrist, not forcefully, but with desperation, and asked about the apartment. More specifically, he wanted to know how I planned to handle the rent on my own, claiming my income wasn't enough to cover it. That's when the real picture came together. His concern wasn't closure, nor was it about collecting his belongings. It was about money. What Justin didn't realize or had chosen to ignore was that for the last year, I'd been paying more than half the rent. His finances had been slipping, his job less stable than he admitted, and he'd been overspending while leaning on my steady paycheck. Meanwhile, he played the role of main provider in front of friends and apparently Maria. I gave him a sweet smile and said I'd be fine on my own, adding, "Unlike some people, I actually save instead of blowing money on hotels and jewelry." The blood drained from his face. He knew I was onto him. I walked out of that coffee shop lighter than I had felt in weeks. Not because I'd won some battle, but because I finally saw Justin clearly. A man who valued appearances more than substance, who lied to protect an image, who abandoned me when I no longer suited his storyline. By Saturday, Aaron kept an eye on things while Justin came by for more of his stuff. I stayed out, spending the day at a prenatal yoga class. Highly recommend if you're pregnant and stressed. When I got back, the place looked emptier, but in a good way. More mine. That night, I started rearranging furniture, reclaiming the space. Over the next several weeks, I found my rhythm. Work, doctor visits, vitamins, careful budgeting. I wasn't just getting by anymore. I was building a different kind of future. Meanwhile, Justin and Maria's fairy tale wasn't going well. Through Sergio, whose cousin worked at a restaurant where they were frequent, loud customers, I learned Maria was already unhappy. Justin had sold her a fantasy about financial stability, but the truth caught up. About a month after our last coffee shop meeting, I ran into Maria at the grocery store. I was comparing prenatal vitamins when our carts bumped. Her face cycled through shock, guilt, and defiance. She greeted me awkwardly, said I looked good. I told her she looked tired, which she did. She wore the same strained expression Justin had that day in the cafe. The silence stretched until she blurted that Justin told her we were basically done when they started. According to him, we were just living together until the lease ended. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She fumbled through what sounded like half an excuse, half an apology, insisting she wouldn't have gotten involved if she knew we were still together. I finally said, "Doesn't matter now. He's yours. Enjoy." As I turned away, she called after me. "He's not what I thought. He promises things he can't give." I looked back at her, this former friend, now smaller in my eyes because of her choices. Sounds like a personal problem, not mine. And I walked off. 6 weeks after that infamous birthday party, my small bump began to show. Not huge, but impossible to miss. I decided it was time to share the news openly. My boss was the first to know, and she was incredibly supportive, offering flexible hours for later in pregnancy. Then I told friends and family. Word spreads fast, so I knew it would reach Justin eventually, but I wasn't hiding. This baby was happening with or without him. Sure enough, by week 17, 7 weeks after the breakup, my phone lit up with desperate text. Is it true? Are you pregnant? Why didn't you tell me? We need to talk. Pick up, Lily. This involves me too. I ignored them, not out of spite, but because I wasn't ready. I needed to decide for myself what role, if any, he would play in our child's life. The text kept coming, more frantic. I have rights. You can't keep my child from me. Call me back or I'm coming over. That last message forced me to respond. I told him not to show up uninvited, that I would call the police if needed, and that I'd reach out when I was prepared. He stayed quiet for 2 days. Then, as my original post title predicted, he showed up anyway. It was just past 11 p.m. I was in bed with a pregnancy book, jotting notes, when I heard a car door slam, then footsteps, then heavy pounding on my door. Not knocking, pounding. His voice slurred, but unmistakable. Lily, open up. I know you're in there. We need to talk about our baby. I froze, heart racing. Should I call the police? Aaron, pretend I wasn't home? Then I heard it. Crying. Justin, outside my door, drunk and sobbing. His words swung between demands and pleas. He admitted he messed up, begged me to let him in, said it was his baby too. Some part of me, though not pity, recognized it. His big exit, his shiny new life, his escape from useless me, none of it had worked. Reality had caught him, and it looked like a baby and financial ruin. I slipped on a robe and went to the door. I didn't open it. I told him through the wood that he was drunk and needed to leave. We could talk tomorrow when he was sober. He shouted back that he had to see me now to know if it was true. I confirmed, yes, I was pregnant, 18 weeks. Yes, it was his. But this wasn't how to handle it, and he had to go home. There was a dull thud against the door. Maybe his head, maybe his fist. Then, barely audible, he muttered that Maria had left him, saying he wasn't who he thought. Sounds familiar, I couldn't help replying. He let out a hollow laugh and admitted he'd ruined everything. He begged me to let him in, to talk. Hand resting protectively on my bump, I took a breath and said, no, not tonight. But if he wanted, I'd meet him the next morning, 10 o'clock, at the cafe on Main Street. I'd already told him straight, if he showed up late, or worse, drunk again, that was the end. No more chances. For a long moment, there was just silence. I almost thought he'd passed out. Then, in a low voice, he agreed. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., I'll be there. I listened to his uneven steps fading away. A car started, not his, thankfully. At least he'd managed to call a ride, which was more responsibility than usual. When I got back in bed, my phone buzzed with his message. I'm sorry for everything, for the party, for the note, for tonight. I'll make it right somehow. I didn't answer. Words were cheap, and Justin was always good with words. What mattered now were actions, especially with a baby coming. Did I still love him? No. That died the night he humiliated me in front of everyone. Did I hate him? Not anymore. Hate takes energy I need for other things. Tomorrow, I'd meet him. I'd listen. I'd set boundaries. And my decisions would be based on what was best for me and the baby, not his wants. I've always been self-reliant, you know? Meanwhile, Justin was still trying to process everything. He'd send the occasional text asking about the baby or requesting updates on the nurse's reports. I'd reply with straight facts, nothing more, keeping my distance. Every so often, he'd try steering the conversation into personal territory, like asking if I was dating someone. Nope. Or bringing up shows we used to watch together. I'd just nudge the conversation back to neutral ground. Then came the incident. Yes, capital I. It was a Saturday afternoon and I was at Target stocking up on diapers, because every mom blog insists you can never have too many. I accidentally bumped carts with Maria again. What are the odds, right? Only this time was different. She didn't look uncomfortable or defensive. In fact, she seemed relieved to run into me. Right away, she asked how I was doing, how the pregnancy was going, her tone genuinely warm. Then, out of nowhere, she apologized. Not a quick, awkward sorry, but a real, thoughtful apology. She admitted she knew she'd hurt me. She explained that Justin had spun her the same story he'd apparently told multiple women, that he and I were basically done, just coasting, and that I was holding him back from reaching his true potential. Eventually, she found out he was seeing yet another woman while he was still with her. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We ended up grabbing coffee, tea for me, of course, and had this surreal heart-to-heart about Justin. We didn't paint him as a monster, just a man so insecure that he needed constant validation and would lie to get it. As we were saying goodbye, Maria casually mentioned Justin had been fired 2 weeks ago. She thought I should know since it might affect child support. I thanked her and went home, turning it over in my head. I wasn't glad he'd lost his job. It definitely complicated things, but I appreciated the heads up. Later that evening, as I was folding tiny onesies and listening to my favorite podcast, the doorbell rang. I glanced through the peephole, always check the peephole, and saw Justin. He was sober this time, but he looked rough. I opened the door without inviting him in, and he launched straight into it, asking if I'd heard about him losing his job, swearing it wasn't his fault, that he'd been set up. Eventually, he suspiciously asked if I'd run into Maria. I told him yes, we'd crossed paths at Target. His face tried to stay casual, but honestly just looked constipated. He pressed about what we talked about. I said simply, "You mostly." He didn't like that one bit. He started getting worked up, accusing me and Maria of conspiring against him, saying everyone was turning on him while he was just trying his best. I reminded him plainly that this was a situation of his own making, that he chose this path, and the victim act wouldn't work on me. That's when he broke down. Not in some dramatic movie way, just crumpled. He admitted his life was falling apart. No job, no girlfriend, an apartment he could barely afford, and a baby on the way he wasn't ready for. For the briefest second, I felt that old instinct to comfort him, to step in and fix things. But then I remembered his cold birthday note. "You're useless. I deserve better." Instead of reaching out, I stayed still.